Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Big progress on Russia, stay tuned, writes US President Donald Trump as the world awaits Monday's meeting on Ukraine in Washington with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders in attendance. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Belarus sends more migrants to storm the Polish border. Israelis demand the release of hostages and an end to the war in Gaza. And Poland commemorates the 1920 victory over Russia with a state-of-the-art museum. The US is willing to provide Ukraine with security guarantees. Two top American officials have said this will be one of the focal points of Monday's meeting between Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders. Kazimierz Łysiak has more in his report.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem.
The tone of the last meeting between President Trump and Zelenskyy in the Oval Office was hardly a friendly one.
Mr. President, with respect,
this time should be much different, especially since the Ukrainian president won't be there alone.
You are with us.
7 European leaders have so far announced their presence in Washington on Monday. The UK, Germany, France, Italy and Finland are all sending their top officials to the US. They will be joined by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Their goal? Ensure Ukraine doesn't end up with a bad peace agreement with Russia.
We must have strong security guarantees to protect both Ukraine and Europe's vital security interests. Ukraine must be able to uphold its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. There can be no limitations on Ukrainian armed forces.
European leaders are heading to Washington with President Zelenskyy on the heels of the historic meeting on Friday between the US president and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. The meeting which failed to produce any tangible results.
We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there.
While President Putin took this opportunity to repeat the typical Russian propaganda about the war, he did say one thing which he has never mentioned before when talking about Ukraine.
I agree with President Trump. He spoke about this today, that, of course, Ukraine's security must also be ensured.
But how would Putin want to ensure it is unclear. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said in an interview for Fox News Sunday that the Trump administration is considering a policy reminiscent of NATO's most crucial rule: an attack against one is an attack against all.
It means that the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries.
Moscow previously rejected the idea of putting European troops on the ground in Ukraine, the solution of the so-called Coalition of the Willing, led by the UK and France. The coalition held a virtual summit on Sunday.
The objective of this meeting very clearly is as well to be completely clear about the security guarantees we want, the next steps, and how to organize the next meetings with President Putin, Ukraine, US and Europeans.
The meeting of the Coalition of the Willing has concluded ahead of tomorrow's talks in Washington. I emphasize that for peace to prevail, pressure must be applied to the aggressor, not the victim of aggression.
Vladimir Putin reportedly refused a ceasefire in Alaska because he prefers a full peace agreement instead. But that's easier said than done, especially when the person saying it is the one doing the invading.
The only way to reach a deal on anything, whether it's in business or in politics or in geopolitics, the only way to reach a deal is for each side to get something and each side to give something. And that's been very difficult. If it was easy, this wouldn't have been going on for 3.5 years.
What is it that the Trump administration would want Ukraine to give up? Officially conceding territory, one of the main Russian demands, is out of the question.
The constitution of Ukraine makes it impossible impossible to give up territory or trade land. Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia.
Russia is also not willing to withdraw from around 20% of Ukrainian territory it currently occupies. It continued shelling both military and civilian targets even during the Alaska summit.
I cannot see how Putin, for reasons internal as well as external, would say, okay, guys, we are withdrawing, all this war, 3 years of fighting was for nothing. We'll go back to our former borders.
Still, the US president claims that the Alaska summit has been a major step forward, even though he's being vague about the details.
Big progress on Russia. Stay tuned.
For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Łysiak.
And while the world awaits a peace deal for Ukraine, the hybrid war against NATO continues. After the Telegraph reported on mysterious flights between Belarus and Libya, Poland has noted a sharp rise in illegal attempts to cross the border. Sonia Gatabiszczan reports.
Poland's frontiers are under increased pressure. The Polish border guard noted a high number of attempts to illegally cross the Polish-Belarusian border over the weekend.
The long weekend is very busy. The Podwashia Border Guard Department registered over 230 attempts of illegal border crossings at the Polish-Belarusian border on Saturday.
The development comes after an increase in flights between Libya and Belarus. According to Britain's The Telegraph, it could indicate the Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Belarusian ally and counterpart Alexander Lukashenko are launching a new wave of illegal migrants at Europe's eastern border.
What is interesting, since the beginning of this year, we see the increasing number of official contacts between the regime of Khalifa Haftar in Libya and the regime of Alexander Lukashenko.
In May, there were reportedly 2 flights by Belarus state-run Belavia Airlines between Minsk and Benghazi, whereas in June and July the number increased to 4 and 5 respectively. Commenting on the development, a European Commission official told The Telegraph,
"The frequency and nature of these flights, particularly within a short time frame, raise questions about potential coordination or facilitation of irregular migration flows."
According to experts, there could be additional reasons explaining the increased activity between the two countries.
Belarus was a destination where this Libyan military equipment of Russian and Soviet origin was repaired. And probably this increased number of flights from Minsk to Benghazi is related to some arms deals or trainings provided to the militaries. We don't know.
By August 13th, Poland's border guard from the Podlasia region noted over 19,400 attempts of illegal crossing at the Polish-Belarusian border in 2025. But the frontier is tight.
We have the barrier, physical barrier, and also the electronic system, electronic barrier. Our border is monitoring 24 hours per day. That means that every time, every attempt we can see and quickly react. That's why now we had effectiveness about 98%.
As Poland's border with Belarus is becoming increasingly tight, the Polish border guard suggests that the main transit route for illegal migrants now runs through the Polish-Lithuanian border, where the smuggling of illegal migrants tripled in a year. In response to security considerations, in July, Poland introduced temporary checks on its borders with Lithuania and Germany. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
We're moving on now to the Middle East. Thousands of Israelis joined a nationwide strike on Sunday, demanding the release of hostages abducted by Hamas and an end to the war in Gaza. The government, however, seems deaf to their demands and is determined to continue its offensive in Gaza.
At 6:29 a.m. Sunday morning, the exact time the Hamas assault began on October 7, 2023, families of hostages and their supporters launched a nationwide strike. They are demanding the government prioritize a deal to bring loved ones home over its military campaign announced last week to seize Gaza City.
Last week, we decided to call to everyone in Israel, to all the citizens, to stop take a day and stop all the country in one saying, please release the hostages, bring them home, and stop the war.
Protesters blocked major roads leading into Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, marched with yellow ribbons, a symbol of solidarity with the hostages, and gathered outside the country's military headquarters. The demonstrations are truly nationwide, from Galilee to Eilat, with major rallies planned at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, where hundreds of thousands were expected to gather throughout the day.
I'm here today because this is our last chance to stop the insanity, stop the war, stop the government from sacrificing our hostages, sacrificing many more soldiers, sacrificing basically us and the Palestinian people for its own political gain.
In response, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu defended his government's decision to expand the war, insisting it is the only way to prevent another massacre like the one from October 7th from happening.
Both to promote the release of our hostages and to ensure that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel, we must complete the task and defeat Hamas. This is exactly the decision of the cabinet that was made last week. We are determined to implement it.
Clashes have broken out between police and demonstrators, and particularly at roadblocks where protesters were blocking highways leading into major cities. Meanwhile, Jordan has begun airdropping aid into Gaza amid a worsening hunger crisis. Israel, however, disputes local reports of malnutrition, accusing Hamas of diverting supplies. Earlier Sunday, President Isaac Herzog accused the media of fueling pressure on Israel to halt the war, insisting peace will only come once all hostages are freed.
Stop being a bunch of hypocrites. Press, because when you know how to press, you press. Press and tell Hamas, no deal, no nothing until you release them.
But the humanitarian toll in Gaza continues to mount. Gaza's health authorities report that between Saturday and Sunday, Israeli attacks have claimed 47 Palestinian lives and injured more than 200 others. Among them, over half were injured while trying to collect much-needed aid.
There was heavy gunfire around us every minute. Someone was martyred right next to me and I had to run away.
For now, despite mounting protests at home and growing international pressure, Israel's leadership remains committed to pressing ahead with its campaign.
And 5, non-Israeli peaceful civilian administration
is ablaze. 3 people have died and thousands had to be evacuated to escape the fire scorching Spain's west. The situation in Portugal looks no better. Paweł Trzaskowski has this report.
Grief, hope and determination. All these emotions come in great abundance as Spain is being ravaged by wildfires.
I have lived here in Spain for 40 years. I'm Portuguese, and I have never seen anything like this before. I have never seen anything like this in my life. Houses burning, people burning.
3 deaths have been reported in this recent wave of wildfires that have spread easily due to strong winds and high temperatures. Thousands had to be evacuated. The west of the country has particularly been affected, with at least a dozen fires still raging there. Army units were deployed to battle the flames alongside firefighters and volunteers.
We have been putting out the fire here since 1 o'clock in the morning. The whole area was surrounded by fire. There was a fire behind there.
Aerial support is also crucial.
Spain asked for the assistance and activated the civil protection mechanism for the first time ever for the forest fires, and we quickly mobilized 2 rescue planes that were stationed in France.
Spain has received 2 Canadair water bombing planes. They have joined the national forces in the battle against fires, which have so far devastated around 150,000 hectares of the country, almost double the annual average. But the wildfires are not just confined to Spain. In neighboring Portugal, flames are affecting the central and northern parts of the country. And there are no signs of the situation improving anytime soon, with forecast temperatures in the region still expected to exceed 30 degrees Celsius in the coming days. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
The 1920 Battle of Warsaw was a key turning point in the 20th century's European history, when the Polish army defeated the Russian Bolsheviks in a war which prevented the westward expansion of the communist terror. Now, this fascinating chapter of history is being commemorated in the freshly opened museum some 20 kilometers from the Polish capital. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
Hundreds have gathered for the inauguration of the 1920 Battle of Warsaw Museum. The museum itself sits at a historical site where majority of the battles of the 1920 Polish Bolsheviks war were fought, hoping to withstand and defend the capital city of Warsaw. The victory, and also specifically where this museum is situated, is considered one of the turning points of the war fought between 1919 and 1921, preventing the westward expansion of communism into Europe.
The Battle of Warsaw was the culminating moment of the Polish Bolshevik War, which lasted from 1919, actually from the very beginning of that year, until 1920-1921, when peace was signed. The main command was, of course, exercised by Marshal Józef Piłsudski.
And in terms of what can be found in the museum, it ranges from the relics of the leadership of both the Polish as well as Bolshevik forces, as well as armaments and equipments used in the 1920s battle.
There are a number of truly spectacular items, ranging from heavy artillery such as the Armata de Bank to the armored Ford T, Renault FT-17 installation. And there are also unusual mementos of Józef Piłsudski, such as his coat, and relics of Father Ignacy Skorupka, a table sprinkled with his blood. He was a chaplain who accompanied young Polish soldiers here in Ossów as they went into battle, accompanying them in their counterattack against the enemy.
As you can see behind me, the crowds who have gathered are huge, and the interest in visiting the museum is massive. But in terms of the actual experiences of the museum goers, well, the attendees spoke of primarily patriotism as well as national pride, which this object evokes.
First of all, the memorabilia that are on display here. Young people obviously don't know about this, so we came here, the whole family, to instill a little Polish history in them.
Fantastic building, beautiful and amazing both inside and out. Simply brilliant. The exhibition is really worth visiting. There are wide passageways and a lift, so it is also quite important to us that this is a place adapted for everyone.
The number of visitors here and the line to the museum certainly testify to how necessary it was.
The opening itself was attended by both Polish officials as well as heads of states. This included the Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, who, during his speech at the opening ceremony, has said, and I quote, "The greatness of the 1920 victory should and will be the very center of the Polish politics of remembrance." For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
The Film Museum in Łódź has opened Poland's first exhibition devoted to one of the country's best-loved children's book characters, the Mumens. The Mumens, the door is always open, brings the magical world of these Finnish trolls to life. Our reporter, Karolina Szapland, has more.
In a valley far away lives a family of spirited Finnish trolls. Kind and nurturing Mumin Mama, brooding and artistic Mumin Papa, and a Mumin troll whose adventures lie at the heart of a series of books by Tove Jansson. Beloved in Poland, these books are 80 years this year.
Buka was such a distinctive character because, as they say, fairy tales have that kind of atmosphere. I always remember how scary music would play when Buka was about to appear. It wasn't that it was scary, but it created such emotions.
For the Film Museum in Łódź, this anniversary has a special significance because it was here in Łódź in the late 70s when the local film studio Semafor produced 78 episodes of what is now a children's cult classic, The Tales of the Mumens. And I asked the museum curator, Zuzanna Woźniak-Kepe, what made that series so distinctive.
A special thing about this animation, the Polish
adaptations of the Mumens was the technique used for this special animation, the half-flat puppet. So it was actually made on a multiplane thing that was, the puppets were put on the glass panels, and it was animated that way, not the usual puppet way.
This exhibition shows that in 2025, Mumens transcend the books and the movies. They are everywhere, from toys to tattoos. The exhibition title, "The Door is Always Open," reflects the Mumen philosophy. Whenever somebody new appeared in a Mumen valley, there was always a place for them at the Mumen table. And that's a lesson not just for the kids. For TVP World, I'm Karolina Shapland.
On Monday, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, along with several European leaders, will go to Washington for talks with US President Donald Trump. Is peace any closer, or will Ukraine be made a proposal it cannot accept? Well, to talk about it, we are joined by Tomasz Notch, Senior Research Fellow for Nuclear, Space and Missile Defense at GLOBS. Good evening.
Good evening.
So President Donald Trump claims big progress has been made on the Russian issue. Now, given the lack of any major decisions during the summit in Alaska, what could he be talking about? Are these security guarantees we've been hearing about?
Well, with regards to that question, there are probably a number of things that were to be mentioned. First and foremost, the fact that we know what the Russian maximalistic objective technically is for sure. They have been stipulated in great details. There have been a lot of thought about this in the past 3 years, but now it seems that at least the American side has it on paper. That's one thing, that they seem to have a good understanding what Russia is pushing for. And that would help them position their own views, but also to guide both Ukraine and Europe through the process that they envisage to be in some kind of moderator position. The other thing, as you mentioned, is the element of security guarantee, which is a novelty, and obviously from a European perspective, that seems to be a very positive novelty. Up until now, the Trump administration was pretty hesitant to talk about burden sharing when it comes to security guarantees. This is probably the first formal mentioning of that, and the fact that it's happening in a very formal manner, it should be encouraging, because that's a sign that the US is not really moving completely out of the process. Obviously, it's tailoring the process to its own like, and the way how they would prefer to have it, which is not exactly maybe how Ukraine wants to see it and how Europe wants to see it. But it's certainly a positive side that US is committed to continuing the process and also taking some kind of stakeholdership role in this process. I don't think that we actually know how this and when this war is going to end. We know what the Russian maximalistic objectives are. They are not really surprising, what we heard in Alaska. But obviously, at this point, we know almost with certainty that the war is not going to end exactly in terms how Russia would want it to end.
I just wonder whether you're not a bit too optimistic about these security guarantees, because earlier we've heard some reports that Russians would like to see China as the guarantor of peace in Ukraine. Moreover, Donald Trump has already excluded sending any American troops to Ukraine. So, well, and just to add to that, Polish foreign minister also seems quite skeptical about it. Well, so far, Russia has no intention of meeting in a trilateral format, says Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He also added that because of this fact, more pressure should be imposed on Russia. More sanctions should follow. Now, do you think that after this red carpet reception in Alaska, Donald Trump will be keen on imposing more sanctions? Marco Rubio claims that there's little use in sanctions at all.
Well, I think the U.S. will seek to position itself somehow in this whole process. The optics of the meeting in Alaska were, from a European perspective, pretty unfortunate. The red carpet thing, the very casual manner, the discussion between the two leaders, that is not really sending a very positive vibe to Europe. That you're certainly right with that. We don't know what exactly happened in the official setting in the room. Hopefully, European leaders will know that in great detail tomorrow. They have been briefed to some extent already. We don't know whether there's a convergence between what we have seen and what actually happened in the room. That's one thing. The second thing is that we have seen this tit-and-tat moving in one direction to another direction from President Trump a number of times in the past. It happened that he happened to have a very, from European perspective, successful summit in Hague, and now we see a very different thing. It might happen that when he will be meeting Europeans and Ukrainians, we will be again more positively minded. So I wouldn't be that much focusing on how the optics looks. I admit that it's not always looking good, but also the fact that we have not just the Ukrainian president in Washington tomorrow, but it comes with the great support of Europe. I think that will produce a very positive momentum in the negotiations. That's really a sign to the US that both Europeans and Ukrainians understanding this is a continental issue. It's not just a minor issue for us. This is really the generational thing when it comes to our security. And US is a NATO member. It's a stakeholder in European security. I understand that the Trump might have its own objectives and also the administration itself. But at the same point, even if there's a bad deal or there's a push towards the bad deal, it's going to have a negative impact on the US on the mid and long term. So I think the administration is aware of this. They are approaching this from a very different position as we do, Europeans. Both in terms of geography, the situation is different. Also in terms of how they read Russian intentions is different. That's kind of defining their position. And that's defining how they approach these negotiations. But I wouldn't be so pessimistic just by making a judgment on what we have seen in Alaska. There are a number of positive things that are playing out, and everyone seems to be moving in a position where we are giving the negotiations a chance. We will know probably in a week time whether this whole process will lead to somewhere. It might be the case that in a week from now we won't be putting that much hope into any kind of negotiated diplomatic settlement, because we will know that this is not moving anywhere.
Now that's the point, because U.S. Special Envoy for Russia and Ukraine, Steve Witkoff, when he talked today about the summit in Alaska, he said, quote, the point was that we began to see some moderation in the way they are thinking about getting to a final peace deal. Now, there's moderation from the Russian side, okay? Where do you think this sudden change of approach comes from? And if there is a sort of a weakness in Russia, shouldn't Europe, along with the US, exploit it?
Well, I think that there was always a Russian preference to come to the table, to have a big summit, to showcase that Russia is a global power and that with the US is really making the final decisions about this conflict. Timing itself is really interesting. We see, if you look at the situation on the battleground, that seems to be fairly more positive to Russia than it has been over the course of the past year and a half or even more. So that could be a moment that might have motivated the Russians to go in. But obviously, I'm not an economist, but you see increasingly the voices that the war is actually having its toll on the Russian economy more and more. We have been hearing this for 3 years, obviously, but at some point it might be actually true. And we don't know what are the internal factors that are pushing Putin to slightly modify his position and maybe test that maybe this might be the time when he can get some of his objectives in a different place, not just on the battleground, but maybe shortening the route via diplomatic engagements. I am skeptical that Russia would be successful in reaching maximalistic objectives. Some of those claims that they have made are simply not realistic, and there is an understanding that you cannot really have everything. It has been said by U.S. administration officials that everyone needs to make compromises, including the Russia. I think what Witkoff has said that there's a softening in terms of their approachability, the fact that they are willing to talk. But in terms of substance, as you have indicated, they haven't really changed that much. And that would need to happen unless we are not going anywhere with an economic negotiations.
So there's a light in this long black tunnel. The question whether it's not a fast approaching train. Thomas Notch, Senior Research Fellow for Nuclear, Space and Missile Defense at Globsec, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great evening.
Thank you, and thank you for watching. That would be all for now. Have a great evening too.